Hello, everyone. My name is Jules. I am the Strategic Communications Manager at Sport New Zealand, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you today to Kat Day, who is the General Manager of Breakout Room. In case you didn't know, Breakout Room is a marketing agency, and Kat leads a team of 10 influencer experts and content producers. Their clients include Sport New Zealand, Whittaker's, and Z Energy, amongst others. Kat has over 20 years' experience in developing marketing campaigns and has become an expert at creating influencer-led campaigns that drive engagement and win awards. We've worked with Kat and her team on our Unpros influencer campaign, and you will hear all about the success of that campaign today, and that's why we're really keen to share our knowledge with you here today. The growth in the influencer space is phenomenal, so we're very excited to have Kat here today to share her knowledge. Over to you, Kat.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. So I wanted to talk today about influencers and particularly looking first and foremost why influencers at all. Influencers not where I started 20 years ago. They've really crept up on all of us and become a really big and powerful tool in our marketing toolkit. So we'll start with the why and then have a look at some of the top tips of how we can work with them, and then talk about the Unpro campaign that we worked on with Sport New Zealand. So I'm not telling anyone anything new here. We are all on social media a lot. So much so that you can see here the average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social media, but if we look at younger audiences, that can rise to 7 to 8 hours, where they find the time for anything else. So that is a lot of time on social. We still over-index here in New Zealand on Meta. You can see here Facebook Messenger, Instagram really sort of dominating, but I would say look at TikTok. It might only be 20-something%, but it is aging up fast, and it is the fastest growing social media platform in New Zealand. And different platforms meet different needs. Interestingly, YouTube is wildly over-indexing in an older audience, probably for sort of quite a lot of educational as well as entertaining videos. LinkedIn is something we're probably all familiar with, which was something that we use for sort of professional life. But yeah, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, where we're kind of showing how we see the world and where we're showing how we have fun. So tied to the rise in social media consumption is this massive rise in influencer marketing. And I think it's worth talking a little bit about the power of this stuff. 69% of consumers more likely to trust something that they hear from an influencer than anything that they hear coming from a brand or an organization. 86% of consumers making a purchase inspired by an influencer at least once a year. That's something that resonates with me. I don't know about everybody else in the room, but definitely I have been influenced more than once this year. And it's becoming increasingly difficult for brands and organizations to stand out online. It's so cluttered, we're getting so many messages, there's so much noise, cutting through is really hard. And that's why influencer marketing, I think, has been born, because suddenly there are ways to collaborate with people who've amassed a whole heap of followers, and they're telling stories in an authentic way. It's persuasive, and that's why it cuts through. So it's almost like influencer campaigns are sort of sponsored word of mouth. Once upon a time, when I was significantly younger, we talked about word of mouth, and no one could work out how to harness it, and no one could work out how to sort of control it. Now we can. You know, influencers are sort of this weird cross between people talking to their best friend in a word of mouth situation and even being kind of journalists, you know. They're trialing products, they're rating products, etc. Unsurprisingly, younger people are the highest percentage following influencers and the most likely to be influenced. There's also a female skew, women more likely to follow influencers than men. And 67% of consumers believe that the key to the best brand collabs is that honest, unbiased trust piece, which we see coming through really strongly. So the lay of the land. Global marketing in the influencer space has now reached 3.3 billion US in 2025. That's more than tripled in the last 5 years. We've seen a 9% expected growth between 25 and 29 on the global scale, but a 7% increase in New Zealand as well, 10% year-on-year change here. 75% of brands have a dedicated budget for influencer marketing, and I can definitely say from my business, we've seen an increase, of almost tenfold in the last year to 2 years in the amount of briefs coming our way in this space. And 85% of marketers find influencer marketing effective. So influencers are a media channel, but they have this human voice. And I think the other thing to think about is how influencers and media can work together, because there's what the creator can leverage themselves in their organic audience, and then there's what you can do where you align media and media spend with that to make a sort of targeted campaign and a higher reach campaign as well. So when you put media and influencers together, you're basically taking the best of the influencer authenticity piece and you're getting the media strategy together to make it a really trusted and effective media channel. And it's not just top of the funnel fluff. Influencer is now embedded across the whole brand ecosystem, and over half of 35-year-olds have said that they've discovered new products. Looking at influencer organic reach, this really is the sort of gold, and this is where you're not spending any money on media behind an influencer. So this would be if you are asking potentially sports people who've played your sport before to use their channels to get your messages across. No money might be changing hands at all at this point. And this is where they absolutely have that consistent, strong organic reach. They outperform brand content because of their storytelling, because of the high engagement from their follower bases, but also there's a preferential algorithmic treatment on platforms like TikTok and Instagram that means that influencer content is surfaced more often. And you can maximize reach. One of the ways that we really like to do this is by using the platform collaboration feature where it's possible. So on Instagram, you can do a collaboration post between the influencer's post and your organization. And it means that the post shows up in your brand feed and the influencer's feed at the same time. If you want to put spend on, it puts spend across both. TikTok have just brought that in as well, but you do have to have 10,000 followers on the brand side in order to leverage that. But that used to be the case in Instagram as well. It may well come down. We also recommend waiting 2 or 3 days to allow the content to maximize that organic reach before you add any spend. There's no point paying to reach people that you might reach anyway. So hold back on the spend, let it do its thing, and then reach the people you haven't already reached. Obviously, applying paid is really good for maximizing that further reach. Look at suitable budgets. So obviously, when budget sizes are smaller, we focus on an awareness objective, but you might want to look at other objectives too, engagement or possibly view through if you're doing video content. And again, selecting influencers that have the power to have these sort of strong view through rates. It is amazing how many influencers have those shorter rates, and you really have to get your message in the first couple of seconds. Influencer content outperforms brand creative. I found these stats pretty compelling, but better than 77% of adverts in delivering new information, better than 72% of adverts in credibility. We've talked already about this sort of authenticity, credibility piece. Better than 67% with relevance, and better than 39% with enjoyment. And also outperforms with that kind of creative placement as well. So if you're looking at an average view-through rate of 3 seconds, which I get is really short, but this is what we're talking about here. Brand content at 3.04%, getting to that 3-second mark. Influencer content at 30.3%. So you're immediately 10 times more likely to get to the 3-second mark with an influencer piece of content. Engagement rate, again, brand content 0.94%, influencer 2%. This is likes, comments, shares, saves. And then average watch time. So your average watch time on a piece of brand content, 1.42 seconds, influencer content, 7.9 seconds. So it really is outperforming across view-through, engagement, watch time, more effective at holding that attention, driving that interaction piece. The watch out, though, is with brand content, we're probably really aware and very good at putting a logo or a message right at the start. With influencer content, just having that in mind, that you don't have someone who chats a little bit and then talks about the brand later, because you might not still have all of your audience by that point. So how do you decide who to work with? Finding the right type of influencer is crucial, and obviously you guys know your organizations, your brands, the people you're trying to reach the best of all. So you probably have some ideas of the kind of people that they're interested in. I would say think about the size and the engagement rates of different people. Yes, you can have people with huge engagements, the heroes and the macros. The micro, nano level here tend to have much higher engagement. So it is worth considering smaller follower numbers for that higher engagement piece and that longer view-through piece. We are seeing quite a good correlation there as well. And then digging into the stats. So you can see on the side here the kind of thing that you can get from an influencer if you ask to see their stats, where they'll show you what their engagement, followers, etc. are on all the different platforms. And they'll screen grab multiple screens that look like this, and you'll have to sort of wade through. But I would say have a really good look at who follows the talent. It is really surprising who their followers are, and you can only get that from having a bit of a deep dive through those stats. For example, we work with Jazz Thornton. She's 30 years old, and yet she has a really high proportion of followers who are aged 13 to 17 because she talks to school children and she talks about mental health. But you wouldn't necessarily know that until you dug into those figures. Size of audience, but also look at things like demographics, age, location, gender. It can be surprising what you find there. Engagement, always good to look how many people engage with their content over the past few posts and how long they typically view content for. You can see in the example here that on the left-hand side, the person's view-through rate is 19.9 seconds. On the right-hand side, 1.3 seconds. So if you were working with the person on the right, you'd really have to get that brand message in pretty quick. You've got a bit more time on the left. And then alignment. What does the influencer usually post about? It's really important that they're talking about things related to what you want them to talk about, and that it doesn't feel sort of shoehorned in or jarring from what they normally talk about. Are their audience likely to be interested in your message? And does their kind of style, personality align with what you're trying to say? And then just some best practice examples here. And I think it's worth kind of talking through some of these together. Relevance over reach. So obviously, again, we've talked about this authentic connection, and it's almost like I can't labor it too much, but it is really important to find people who are relevant to what you're wanting to talk about, and much more important to have someone relevant than someone with masses of followers. So really keep the relevance over reach mantra in mind. Diversity is really important, not in a box-ticking way, in a showcase the real diversity of your audience. Reflect who you want to talk to with the people who are talking to them. Be clear about your purpose. Clearly communicate what you want to achieve. For example, are you promoting an event? Are you trying to get people to sign up? Are you trying to get people to trial a product, etc.? Provide toolkits, not templates. This is a big one. I think in the past, influencers have sometimes felt a bit false. There was lots of hashtag ad, and everybody thought, selling products, and it was all a bit horrible. I think now we've moved to a place where you provide more of a toolkit of the kind of things you want an influencer to talk about, and then you let them talk in their authentic voice, their way. And again, let them speak their language, so trying not to script too much. It's really hard to not tell people how they should say things and what they should say when you're the expert and you know it best, but actually letting them speak in their authentic voice is always more powerful. Celebrate and share their work. I think if an influencer is doing work on behalf of your organization, it's really nice to be sharing it on your channels and making it feel like a sort of two-way conversation and a partnership. Influencers love a longer-term relationship, and we've definitely seen that the stats bear out that longer-term relationships do drive better engagement levels. So consider how the influencer could be involved multiple times through the year rather than just popping up, spreading a message and disappearing. Definitely feels more authentic if they're part of your journey. And repeat opportunities would be the alternative, I guess. If you didn't have a long-term relationship, would there be opportunities for a regular repetition, like every season or something? Compensate fairly. This doesn't have to be cash. It often is in my part of the business, but it doesn't have to be. Influencers absolutely want to follow passion projects. They absolutely want to give back to organisations that have been an important part of their lives, particularly when they were growing up or coming through a sport or something. But you might want to think about whether there's experiences or tickets or profile building opportunities that they can be part of, so they are being compensated in a way that feels fair to both parties. And then measure impact. I would say establishing up front what you want to achieve and then measuring success is really important, because otherwise you just don't know how it's performed and what you've done. So thinking about, is there an engagement rate you want to achieve? Are there sign-ups you need to hit, site visits, sentiment, etc.? So what's the process? These are some quite heavy slides, so strap in. But I feel like it's quite good to go through the nitty-gritty of what we need to achieve to get here. So you define those campaign objectives at the front. You think about your influencer selection and you choose who you're going to work with, identifying the ideal influencers and looking at things like their demographics, their views, their values, their interests, their engagement rates, etc. Then you need to shortlist them down, because you can't work with everybody and you probably shouldn't. So really decide through all your research who your kind of priority people are, who you want to work with most to least. Outreach, and you may have a budget that you can spend, or you may have a ticketing allocation or something that you've got. So start outreaching to sort of gauge that interest and availability. And that might be direct to influencer, or it might be via their agent. This is a bit of a funny one, because for me, I would always go through an agent if there is an agent. However, if you have different relationships with influencers, that's also fine. Contracting and negotiation, I've got a little slide on that coming up, but for anybody interested and available, you begin that sort of negotiating of terms and agreements. Things like fees, timelines, the content types that you want, the usage rights, etc. And then once that contract's signed, provide the influencer with a brief, remembering that toolkit, not template mantra. Negotiating tips. So I would say, big one at the top, avoid revealing your budget too early if you have a budget. We're all human. If somebody offered us a large amount of money to do a small amount of work, we'd say yes. Not that I'm suggesting that's what people do. However, it is better to ask the influencer or the agent what their rates and fees are for the specific deliverables that you're after, and then you can be adjusting and negotiating together. If the influencer doesn't have a rate card, I think you have to go in with an offer on the lower side and negotiate up. Otherwise, you could possibly overpay. Make sure you have access to the audience data. These were these screen grabs that we looked at earlier, because this will really determine whether the audience aligns with your target and will probably help when you're negotiating as well. If the influencer is a good fit, obviously look at these longer term opportunities and collaborations. It's possible that you can get more favourable terms if there's a longer term opportunity. We also see a lot of influencers on long-term contracts doing quite a lot of added value bonus content, so stories where they talk about the campaign that aren't part of the campaign, but they talk about how much they love it outside of what they've been contracted to do, and that's really important. And then I would say, if you are going to boost content, you need to talk about that when you're negotiating, because for agents in particular, if boosting is more than a certain amount, usually about $1,500, there will be additional usage fees or a higher rate charged. If you come in later and ask to add that on, it tends to be more onerous than if you've done it when you're negotiating up front. So definitely worth having a bit of a think about that stuff at the negotiation point. You could consider performance-based compensation. There could be some sort of commission on lead gen or sales, which might incentivize a longer-term partnership. That might not be relevant. Definitely don't pay 100% upfront. Payment usually is made after all of the content has been delivered, or you have some sort of payment staggered terms through the contract. Exclusivity is a really interesting one. I think if you are a brand with sort of competitors, then you might want to look at exclusivity. This obviously only pushes the price in one direction, which is up. However, it's something to think about at the negotiation stage, because if you don't feel comfortable with an influencer talking about another brand or another organization, get that in at that point. Be clear about your deliverables, for instance, a TikTok or an Instagram reel, a story, etc., and factor in additional costs. Are you asking to have some sort of travel involved, accommodation, tickets? Are you paying for that? Is the influencer getting there under their own steam? All of that comes into that negotiation point. And then, after you've done all your negotiating, you've briefed your influencer, you've agreed on goals, audience, key messages, deliverables, mandatories, timings. They come back with a concept. You collaborate with them and they develop creative ideas that fit the brand and the brief. I can't stress enough how much that needs to come from them rather than be put on them by us. Review and refine their concept, make sure that you're happy. This is the perfect time to put in tweaks. You don't have to accept wholesale what they're offering, but I would say it needs to come from them, and then you need to be steering. And then they will produce the content, which could be statics, video, etc., incorporating all your feedback. You approve it, dispatch it, it's scheduled, it goes live. And then you keep a really close eye on performance, optimizing as needed. We have had things happen in the past where, for instance, a post went up and then some very racist people said horrible things, and so we had to take it down. You just have to keep an eye on what's happening and react in real time, with whether you're hiding comments or taking posts down, etc. That doesn't happen often. Boosting with paid media. So this obviously enables brands to really effectively expand reach and sort of reach those target audiences, could be hard to reach audiences, leveraging the influencer's credibility. So boosting obviously enables brands to reach that broader audience. It also increases engagement because you're targeting basically the right audience with the right content. It can also extend the content lifespan. You can be repurposing content across multiple channels and maximizing your return on investment that way. Influencers as talent obviously build that credibility and trust piece that we've talked about, and boosting content ensures that it's going to be seen. So that's obviously part of the sort of cost-effective piece there. Few boosting tips here. Make sure that there's sufficient licensing agreed up front at the contract stage. Let the content run organically first and then add the spend. We've talked about this already. Boosting budgets don't have to be huge. I mean, 500 to $1,000 behind an influencer post actually makes a huge difference. You could even put on less. But yeah, a little bit of a boost just gives it that extra bit of flight. Contracts should state a set maximum boosting spend and also a set duration. It will probably also talk about a set location, New Zealand only, and specific channels, e.g. Meta, TikTok, etc. And again, we've talked about risk mitigation and what you might do if something goes wrong and you need to pause what you're doing. A little bit on measuring success. I think the key thing is this will differ for every single campaign you run and every single person you work with. But these are just some of the things that we can measure when it comes to influencer campaigns. And some of them are things you would measure with paid, others are more the things you would measure if you were organic only. But for example, on the awareness piece, you can be looking at reach. How many people did you reach? The impressions, how many people looked at the content, your cost per thousand, and you can benchmark all of these things against industry benchmarks to see how your content is performing, and also video views and that view-through rate. Organically, you can also look at follower growth rate. So for instance, check what your follower numbers were before you worked with the influencer, have a look and see if those have changed, a month later, and, hopefully you'll see a nice big jump there. Engagement rates and also click-throughs and lead gen and all that kind of stuff comes in that sort of engagement piece. Sentiment is a really important one. You might be receiving direct messages off the back of influencer content as well. And then conversions, how many sign-ups, ticket sales, etc., cost per acquisition, and obviously user-generated content mentions, how many people are making content that reflects what you've shared with your influencer. So reporting is really important, and definitely once the campaign period is finished, you get all that performance data from your influencer or influencers and build that into a report that covers all your objectives and KPIs and benchmarks, what you did, budgets, fees, and then the results, the reach, the video views, etc. You can also include examples of comments, DMs to showcase that sentiment piece, and relevant business results as well. And then this is a really good time to add in any key learnings or recommendations for next time while it's fresh, which could be related to the process you went through or the content creative, all very helpful for when you're planning the next one. And I thought that I would finish with just showing you what we did with Sport New Zealand, because I feel like that's probably the most relevant example when Sport New Zealand wanted to encourage New Zealand teen girls to go unpro. So the brief that we got was all about inspiring girls aged 13 to 17 to be more active. And we wanted to do this by creating a movement called Unpro. And Unpro is all about emphasizing that having fun, getting involved, having a great time with your friends is much more important than professionalism, being the best, a real sort of get over the kind of fear of failure sort of hurdle. So for the past year, we've worked with a squad of 17, we call them Every Girls, but they are influencers who are really representative of our audience, and they have huge appeal with our target audience as well. We looked at lots and lots and lots of data to find the girls who appealed most to this audience. And each one has been tasked with sharing their unpro journey. So they could choose any sport or active recreation they wanted. We weren't prescriptive at all on what they should do. And we just asked them to try either a new sport or activity or something they hadn't done for a long time alongside their friends and share how they got on. And we were like, emphasize the fun, show us the fails, just take part, get involved, and tell us how you felt. You might have been nervous before you did it. You might have felt great at the end. Tell us everything. And this is...
There's this concept I've been introduced to, and I love it. It's called being unpro.
Unpro.
So this is just some of the content that was shared.
Today we are going unpro.
Unpro, and we're gonna go play some golf.
So let's go unpro.
Go unpro.
Going unpro is just like having fun.
Have a little bit of fun. Go unpro.
And it actually turns out that we're part of an unpro movement.
But it's all about being unpro.
Going unpro is all about having fun.
Get out there and go unpro. You can do it. Woo!
And our audience showed us a lot of love. It's definitely been one of the campaigns that I'm probably most proud of, but also has been the most joyful, because all we've had is girls telling us how much they love it and how much it's inspired them to go out and go unpro themselves. And so there was lots and lots and lots of these kind of comments, but also they shared a lot. And so they were tagging in their friends saying, we need to do this, let's try this. And that was really cool. I also have teenagers myself, and one of the teenagers' friends said that she'd seen Unpro on TikTok, and my daughter was like, oh yeah, Mum was involved with that. And she said, no, she wasn't. And I was like, okay, then it's working. So we made 110 videos. We've had more than 20 million video views to date and more than 600,000 engagements, which has included 550,000 likes, 13,500 shares, 4,300 comments, and there's been 92% positive sentiment, which has been really exciting. And the journey continues. We're about to sign up 3 more influencers. You know, it is true that unfortunately they age out of this category at points, so we have to keep refreshing with newer, younger girls. But yeah, it continues, and it's a really great campaign to be part of. So I guess key takeaways, if I was to kind of think of like the top things to think about, get visibility of the influencers' audience data before partnering with them. You really need to make sure that you're hitting that target audience. The right influencer mix is absolutely crucial to getting the best results you can get, so make sure you get the data. Creative freedom leads to authenticity. Trust that the influencers will know their audience best, and let them do their thing, obviously with the guardrails that you need to provide. Put all the detail into the brief, but let them come back with their creative take on it. Watch out for those additional costs when you're contracting, the boosting rights, the deliverables, the travel, the tickets. Those can be an annoying late addition, so get them in up front. Build additional time into your timelines, particularly with influencers who don't do it as their sole job. Influencers are humans and they don't always stick to timelines. Ensure you have clear objectives and KPIs up front so you can really measure that success piece. And then look, if you can, to create long-term partnerships or repeat opportunities so that you've got that sort of greater authenticity and alignment. Does anyone have questions?
Do you want a microphone? No. Okay.
Yeah, they were all paid. And that was quite important because I think it would be nice to move to a secondary stage of UGC, but I think to kick it off, we had to not only pay the influencers, but put spend behind their content as well, because Unpro, before we did this campaign, didn't exist as a movement. Like it wasn't something people knew. I think it is starting to build a life of its own now, but it definitely needed that payment at the front. Yes, so through Sport New Zealand, we were able to get some partner organisations that were very generous with giving different activities that the influencers could do. But, you know, some of the influencers we were working with were at school. So, you know, we had girls who were playing netball with their school friends in their school and filming that sort of content. So, yeah, that was really cool. Yes, that happened at the very beginning of the journey, and I hope we've got better. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, I would love us to be working more closely so that, because, you know, you posting it as well as us posting it immediately gives it more.
People just need to know, right?
Yeah.
So I think it would be really great just as a girl, because
in terms of fee to the influencer or boosting, it's really hard. It depends. I would say in that micro, you're probably talking a couple of $1,000s. In the nano, a couple of $1,000s. In the micro, you'd probably be moving into the sort of around 5 or 6. And then, up into the sort of medium spend, you might be sort of about 10. And that's for one video that's shared to Reels and TikTok with probably a supporting story set. But look, every single agent, every single influencer, they all have a different price, and campaign by campaign they charge a different amount because they will charge less to do something with Sport New Zealand than to work with a more corporate brand because they believe in the campaign or because they really love the idea of getting fitter or more active. So it is unfortunately not a kind of piece of string, but those are kind of good benchmarks, I think. We have to always put hashtag ad, and that's advertising standard authority rules, like you just have to include that. We are now doing collabs with the It's My Move page, so you can see that. Before that we were hashtagging Unpro and hashtagging It's My Move. It was interesting because when we started, we were concerned about whether collaborating with It's My Move would make it feel less authentic, so that was why we kept it feeling quite grassrootsy. As we've gone on, we tested with the collaboration piece and it made no difference at all. So then obviously it was much better to collaborate with It's My Move because that's seen a spike in followers on that channel as well, which has been really good to see. Well, that's really hard. Yeah.
That's a question for us, yes.
Yeah.
Don't know the answer right now, but don't worry. Yeah.
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 But it was really nice because Jazz Thornton is an example of one of those influencers who we worked with for a long time. We worked with her for the first 3 months and then we worked with her for an additional 6 months. And as part of the 6 months, not only did she give us extra content, but she also included Unpro in all of the schools talks that she did in Auckland and in Wellington. So she went to more than 20 schools, and I can't remember the number of people she spoke to, but it was huge. And it was really nice because the other week we got sent from one of the schools their new Unpro club, which is a lunchtime club where they've taken it on board and they're doing it. And so I feel like there's lots of that kind of, things that we're being told that's not real data, but it's starting to feel like it's working.